Okay, hi. So welcome. We have a special guest on our show today. Could you introduce yourself, please, Miss Carolyn?
Hi, my name is Caroline Colesworthy. My pronouns are she, her.
Mhm.
I live in Southern California on the land of the Ahachima and Tongva people, and I am a board member for the Fund for Reparations Now.
Can you tell us more about what Reparations Now is?
So the Fund for Reparations Now is a white ally organization organizing white people predominantly, but not exclusively, around the giving of reparations now, as well as creating the political will and awareness to actually pass a robust program of federal reparations for the United States for the descendants of enslaved Africans and all Black people.
And can you tell us what your role at FFRN is? Because this is something, prior to this conversation that we've been having on Instagram, Instagram connects the world. So prior to that, this wasn't something that, neither Kel nor I was aware of. So,
and again, thank you for giving us a platform to talk about our work. Talking about reparations is my favorite thing to do.
And I'm sorry, we didn't thank you. We kind of just like abruptly started. I'm sorry about that. Thank you for joining us for this conversation as well.
Thank you. We are currently a 7-person board, all volunteer, and I get to do what I want to do on that board. And we're a completely horizontal structure. I mean, we fit this work into the interstitial space of already busy lives. I'm a working mother of 2, during a pandemic. FFRN became a thing in December 2019 after a year of collaborating with the National African American Reparations Commission, NAARC, which is a program of IBW 21. They have a 10-point reparations platform. I've worked with the fund since February 2020. I remember reading the 10-point platform years ago when I got interested in reparations. And I thought, wow, that's a really robust idea for reparations. Do I have a place here? Can I help reparations? And this white lady couldn't see it. I was like, oh, I don't have a lane, like moving on. But our co-founder, David Gardenier, he saw that 10-point platform and he was like, I see a place for myself here, and other white allies. And he was finishing up graduate school, so he pulled together some of his friends and they just contacted NAARC and said, hey, how about we raise awareness and money for you? And they were like, okay, let's talk about that. Let's make it good. The monies that come through the fund are legally classified as donations because they are a 501c3. We're calling them reparations because it is a systematic gathering of funds in a way that is Black directed for the passage of HR 40, which is our current bit of legislation for reparations in the United States today. That's the push. And so, we are winning hearts and minds and also allowing people an opportunity to start investing in reparations today.
How and when did you first learn about reparations? Because I know it's not something that was often spoken about. Like, we didn't really hear too much about it in school. You hear the 40 acres and a mule conversation, but nothing really deep. And then nowadays, especially possibly because of COVID and getting these payments through COVID, stimulus packages and stuff like that, which we'll get more into that. Kel has some questions around that stuff later in the interview. But when did you first hear about reparations?
Like you, I think I first heard about reparations in school, 40 Acres and a Mule. I did not go to some enlightened institution where they then told me about how that was systematically taken back. You know, I was involved with environmental activism and peace activism as a younger person, and was following the movement for Black lives in the news. I do live in a thoroughly white area. We have only 0.4% Black people in my county. You know, so I was kind of someone paying attention and sending money and not really understanding involvement, you know. But I read Ta-Nehisi Coates' The Argument for Reparations in 2014, and it made perfect sense to me. I thought, this is absolutely the most obvious thing that needs to happen for racial healing. And I should mention that personally, I'm a recovered alcoholic and drug addict. And so I'm familiar with this idea of when you have a period of chaos and harm, you stop the harm, and then you address the ways in which you've harmed someone, and say, here's how I would like to make amends to you. And is there anything else?
Yeah.
You know, and not until you do that in a systematic way can you have a right relationship with that person. Correct. And so, you know, my mother grew up in the Jim Crow South. She had her own bus story with her Black nanny. She slept over at a little girl's house whose father was doing business with other Black men, and she witnessed a cross burning, you know, and she on the lawn of the house where she was sleeping. And she told me these stories as a kid. And so history didn't feel very long ago to me, you know, because my mother was sharing it with me, you know, and of course I was a bookish child. You know, I was reading things and trying my best to pay attention, but reparations was like, it was the Ta-Nehisi Coates article.
Yeah, and that's so important, in my opinion, that your mom shared those stories with you. And you know, it didn't seem like something that's just the norm, even though it was. In some circles it was a normalized thing, but from the way I hear your passion about it and how you're sharing the story with us, it did seem like it was shared in a way like, hey, this was a crazy story, meaning this is not, you know, something that should continue. I think that's an important conversation in white families to have, in order to change the trajectory of what the relationship is like between Blacks and white people, or just POC people and white people in general. But Kel, I know I could keep talking. So Kel, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yes, actually, no, I did want to make a point off of something that you said before I went into my question. I am actually surprised that the dialogue is even happening amongst white people. I didn't assume that they would even have the type of dialogue like, oh, this happened to other people. Like you're saying, your mom actually shared another person's point of view and of how it affects them, because she saw it in real life form. It wasn't just something that she saw on the news. It wasn't something that she, you know, read. It was something that she experienced, and she was able to share that dialogue with you about something that happens on the everyday to us as people of color. So that is definitely amazing. And it's crazy because I've never had like a real true racial conversation with, you know, any of my white counterparts off of fear, like, oh, maybe they're not going to understand. But it's so good to hear that the dialogue is happening. And with that being said, I want to move into, is reparations a fantasy, or is this something that's like actually attainable? Has there ever been like a program of reparations that has like been proven to work?
Thank you. Yes, there have been 6 different instances in the world that are contemporarily known of. I mean, and reparations is really just like a settlement that occurs in a court proceeding, you know, but globally, Germany gave reparations for the Holocaust to the state of Israel, starting in 1961 to 2012, and they paid out $89 billion.
Wow.
And that was directly to the government of Israel.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was until 2012. Wow.
Right,
Wow.
over a very long period of time. Yeah, and when they started paying, they were West Germany. And, you know, which is kind of interesting because people will say, well, you know, my family didn't whatever, or slavery was so long ago, all of those conversations. And it's like, no, the government of the federal government of the United States of America is still liable for the things, for its policies that were in place since the beginning of slavery to today.
Exactly.
All of the ways, right? And it doesn't even matter if we were a different country. If they inherited all the stuff, you know, if you buy a company, you inherit the liability.
Exactly.
Big facts, big facts.
Right? Secondarily, after apartheid, there was a truth and reconciliation process that was trying to create redress for South Africans. And after promises of a much bigger program, it ended up being only $3,900, much like the little payment that we just got in the mail a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Like, what is this card? I do not know.
Right.
Anyway, and they only paid that out to 16,397 people.
Do you happen to know how, right? Do you happen to know how they made that selection? Oh, you know what? I'll put a pin in that question.
No. That's a great question.
I don't happen to know.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
And I love this question because the historical basis for reparations paid out is not actually a part of reparations that I think and talk about on a daily basis. So I bird dogged these facts to answer your question, and this is fun.
Yeah.
So the next one was the US government paid out to Japanese Americans because of the period of internment during World War II.
Wow. Okay.
Japanese Americans were taken away from their land and businesses and put into camps where they would not be seemingly a danger. I've met some of these people, and I drive by one of the camps in California on the eastern side of the Sierras, Manzanar. Between 1948 and 1965, they paid out $1.6 billion, and that was $20,000 to each survivor.
Wow.
And there are also some markers, and you know, like Manzanar is now a place that people can go to have a historical experience of what happened. A lot like you know, the concentration camps in Germany can be visited to have a historical experience. So the next one was for sterilizations. And I want to caution viewers that this is a very triggering thing.
The whole conversation is triggering, but I think it's a conversation that needed to be had. So feel free to go in and continue.
In the United States from 1927 to 1981, a year after I was born, there was forced sterilization of mentally ill, largely poor Black women. And state by state, those reparations were supposed to happen. And to this day, it has only been paid out by the state of North Carolina. And they paid $50,000 to 177 women.
Wow.
And there was a notable case I read about. A woman said, "I won't take your money." And And that is both beautiful and crazy to my head.
Yeah, yeah. I
Because she
guess
said, what does that say about the value of my life?
yes,
I love
yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking too. Wow. And it makes me think about I wonder, like, I've heard stories. I know that we're talking about reparations specifically for African Americans, but I wonder if there was any set of reparations for I think it was in Puerto Rico, where they did the testing of birth control. And this was, I believe, in this, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. And a lot of women became sterile because of it and had many health issues afterwards. But it's just crazy, or really interesting, to hear how many different forms of reparations have happened over the years, over the decades,
and
rather.
continues to happen, but yet
And continue to happen.
but yet we still haven't had, you know. Go ahead.
Right.
Go ahead.
I mean, the line between reparations and settlements seems really fine to me. You know, like the other two examples that I saw given were the Tuskegee experiment, where 399 Black men who had syphilis were left untreated. And they did not know that they were untreated. And so they continued to suffer much worse consequences of their diseases because they were experimented upon. And then Rosewood, which was a deadly race riot in Florida.
Yes.
And the state of Florida paid those reparations. But, you know, anytime you would have some toxic event and there would be a class action suit, you know, brought on the basis of environmental justice, you know, we could also think of that as reparations. And so it's a really fine line.
Okay.
And I mean, and to caveat that, I guess we as a community have to also understand that there will never be a certain price that we can ever put on what our experience was and what our ancestors had to endure. So there's never going to ever be a point where you can be like, $5 million will caveat everything that we've went through and that we're continuing to go through after the 400 years has passed. So it does have to kind of level set and have like a even tone on how can we move forward. And I like the fact that you guys are putting in a plan, a part of your 10-point plan, because I did get a chance to review it, is to, you know, one, to preserve the history with our monuments and the things that we have there. Also is to bring that back into the community, to allow them to have, you know, more of like a solid foundation or infrastructure to be able to build and to, you know, to continue our legacy and have like that nice jump start. So those are the things that are really, you know, I feel like that are important. But to share with those who don't know a lot about our 10-point plan, can you give us kind of a brief overview of what the 10-point plan of reparation is?
Yes. Really fast, I would like to start with, in my head, it is, we can't ever make it right, but it shouldn't stop us from trying.
Absolutely.
So in 1989, John Conyers brought a bill to study reparations in the United States at the federal level and to create a program. Then in 2014, National African American Reparations Commission came together and said, when HR 40 gets passed, what will it look like? They'll assemble a commission, but we don't have to wait for the commission. You know, we are Black scholars and clergy and politicians, and we'll put together a program, a robust program, and we'll put it out there so that when HR 40 passes, we'll be like, here you go. This is what we want. So they have a 10-point platform. The first one is for formal apology, because of course it's going to hit everyone differently. Right. And so it has to happen in all the possible ways. So a formal apology that includes a roll call of all of the members of the Senate and Congress for each of their districts. And I vision that on C-SPAN. It will be the first time I ever watch C-SPAN through the day. I'll be like, roll call, get the popcorn. Number 2, the right of repatriation. And I personally hope that that includes a birthright style trip. If you don't want to be repatriated, you know, you want to stay in the United States, but the federal government should definitely, you know, bankroll your trip to West Africa to see the place and to, you know, to understand
Wow.
history.
Right?
That would be great. Because our history is lost. It was, you know, it was stolen from us. And a lot of people don't know where their backgrounds come from. That would be, a lot of people have never left their neighborhoods, their counties, their states.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Well, and what if it had a national tour before it went to West Africa?
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many beautiful and creative ways that we could be repairing what is so broken. Number 3, the right to land. Number 4, funds for cooperative enterprises. You know, and that really addresses loss of businesses and land through seizure, through projects, through race riots and more. Resources for health, wellness, and healing.
Wow.
Yeah,
Education.
That's a big one.
The healing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Resources for that.
Yeah.
Mental health is definitely needed all across the board, and even more so in the Black communities.
Shout out to Rachel Cargill and the Loveland Foundation, which provides mental health services for all Black women. Just apply.
Yes, thank you for, I love that shameless shout out. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I also just want to call in that I want to start a nonprofit that provides Black home birth midwifery for Black women.
Amen.
Funded by white women.
Amen.
So I am at Caroline Colesworthy on Instagram, or at Fund for Reparations now. If you're the person to make that happen, you get in touch with me.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's awesome.
6 is education. 7 is affordable housing. 8, strengthening Black information and communications networks.
Oh, yes.
Newspapers, radio stations, like all the communications to uplift and to invest in the network of reality.
Yeah.
Really. Number 9, the one that we're currently funding, preserving Black sacred sites and monuments.
Okay.
To commemorate, memorialize, and to build the national understanding of what has happened, because few people understand really what has happened. And then number 10 is repairing the damages of the criminal injustice system.
That one is going to be a hard one. With that 10-point plan, do you have a specific point that you guys are prioritizing first? Or is it just kind of like whatever we can get, we're going after?
Like the preservation of the sites that you mentioned.
So point 9 is really well situated to happen right now from the private sector.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we can't raise money for, you know, healthcare for all Black families today, you know, at all. If I could, I would.
Right.
You know, but we can raise funds to maintain memorial sites, to invest in projects of history and storytelling, you know, and so we have actually, our fund has been kind of given away for a period of time to the Elaine Legacy Center, which commemorates the Elaine Massacre, which was one of the race events in the Red Summer of 1919, October 1st in Elaine, Arkansas. Possibly worse than what happened in Tulsa, and it decimated the community. Wow. And it is not even known. You know, even Red Summer 1919 is not necessarily known
Yeah,
by white people.
How has that been working with that partnership with the education? Well, I guess that would be like the Department of Education, or would that be Congress, to like actually instill more facts, more history, more Black history into the curriculums?
Right. Well, that's happening at local levels for sure. Certainly, this is what NAARC came up with for when HR 40 passes, and HR 40 was reintroduced again this year by Representative Sheila Jackson Lee from Texas. It has 117 co-signers this year. In the House of Representatives, it has never had more than 100. Wow. And then on January 25th, very quietly, Senator Cory Booker introduced H40, the same number. And I think he's at 15 co-signers. And so the passage of HR 40 this year is tentatively seen as a thing that is possible, which, and it's not reparations, nobody's cutting checks when HR 40 is passed, but it empowers people to get together and sit in the room and say, what are we paying reparations for? And how could we roll this out in a meaningful way?
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. What exactly? Okay.
So, and it is up to us to hold our senators accountable to that bill, our representatives accountable to that bill, and to continue dreaming of all of the ways in which a truly meaningful program of reparations could be created in this country. And I mean, I've got 2 kids, curriculum, 100%.
Right.
That's really important.
So
you know, the well-being of Black mothers, really important.
It's with joy that we're able to have these conversations with you as someone wanting to be our ally, and not taking it a step further, not even just being an ally of the Black and brown community, but being an ally of the women, because a lot of people don't speak up for the women. So for that, I thank you. I appreciate you.
Well, just to continue the conversation, because I know we're short on time. I wanted to know 2 last questions. One, how would we determine who, now this is a deeper question, so I know you may not have the answer, but how would we determine who would be granted reparations when African Americans are not a monolith, you know, meaning we're of mixed descent and nationalities and ethnicities? So I'll start with that question first.
That is going to be decided by far greater minds than mine.
Okay.
By Black scholars, politicians, and clergy who have been doing this work their entire lives. Mm-hmm. You know? And I do not let this difficult question stop me from pushing forward on the issue of reparations, because if we get into the whatabouts and we let that, you know, cloud up the whole thing, you know, this is just not the stumbling block that people want to make out that it is.
I agree.
Yeah.
So, and certainly something that is scalable, you know, to pinpoint individuals, perhaps give certain people of certain income the possibility to opt out or to pay forward or to put in trust or something like this. You know, recent Black immigrants, you know, if your family came after 1948 or maybe after the VA bill, maybe after fair housing, you know, the wealth issue would be different. There are those who would restrict reparations to only individuals who can claim direct ancestry from enslaved people. And I find that very problematic. Yes. I find that to be very exclusive. It reminds me of blood quantum with Native Americans.
Yes.
And the records that were kept are inadequate in every way.
Exactly.
You know, and besides that, I don't care if your family was enslaved in Virginia in 1620, or you are a Black individual who got here from Togo last summer. If you are experiencing a moment with an officer of the law, there is no difference. And the fear that you might feel is absolutely the same. And the consequences could be the same. And so there needs to be redress across the board, you know, and probably something scalable to reflect those different realities.
Right. I think people think slavery has ended, but now it's just a more modernized, you know, view of slavery.
Private prisons.
Slavery. Right?
Exactly. Private prisons, everything.
Dr. David Ragland says, for slavery and the world that slavery created.
Yes.
Right? We've had, you know, the convict leasing program. We have had, you know, Michelle Alexander brings us the new Jim Crow and the understanding that, you know, the laws shifted very much, but the terror and the oppression has remained the same.
Yeah,
you know?
At the end of the day, it's still systemic, and that is the issue. So I agree wholeheartedly with you that you know, someone could come here today and experience the oppression of what was set in place so many hundreds of years ago. So I think it's very important to say that. And, you know, for my final question, I just want to know, you know, of course, we would not be ourselves if we didn't ask questions like these for our audience and for ourselves. But, you know, what is the white allies' role in reparations? And I mean, I think you've spelled a lot of it out throughout this conversation, but I want you to elaborate on that and how you feel it's your responsibility to be a part of these conversations, and your counterparts' responsibility to assist in helping with this situation and bringing it to the forefront of government conversations.
That's a valid question. Like, what would be the call to action that you would, you know, ask for your other counterparts to be?
Right.
Knowing that we're not all the same, you know, and I'm sure that's the same in the white community as well. But, you know, what is the white allies' role specifically? Because white allies like yourself exist, just like in the gay community, heterosexual allies for the gay community exist. I'd like to claim that for myself personally. That's something that's really important to me, the LGBTQ community and uplifting them. So, you know, that's why I want to ask you the same way I would want someone from the LGBTQ community to ask me, what do you think is your role?
Yeah. Well, the reason it's hard for me to answer is because I see the dysfunction of white supremacy in my heart and in federal policy and global policy, and it is the same. It's just scaled differently, you know? And so I want people, for me, it has been, you know, a tremendous journey of healing and understanding, because it boggles the mind as a white person. It's possible to think to yourself, but I love Black people. But I love Black people. How is this happening? Right? And so we have to humble ourselves. We have to, you know, question the ways in which we're perpetuating white supremacy. How are we perpetuating this culture? One of the things is not talking about hard shit, right? Avoiding conflict. I was trained to avoid conflict, you know, and then this gets into patriarchy. There are so many ways in which we can be breaking down systems of oppression, regardless of if we have Black friends or we've got Black partners or we don't. You know, it is very easy for white people to go into their school of their children, where it is predominantly white, but not exclusively white, and be like, what are the 10 books that you will be reading this year in class? Why are those all books by white authors with white characters? that is not a representation of the United States. Like, that's not a representation of our county. That's not a representation of these students. Where is a book about beautiful young Black children that is not about slavery?
Yes.
Right? That is just about Black childhood.
Yes.
Right? If we're part of an organization, you know, why don't we have any people of color on our board?
Mhm.
Oh, because being on a board is a position of extreme privilege. And how can we expect people who are making 56 cents on the white man's dollar to devote 4 hours of their month to sitting on a board? Right? And we need to talk about these things.
Breaking it down.
Awareness and accountability is what I'm hearing.
From the inside out. Yeah.
Right? And so just questioning, we white people need to talk to each other consistently, you know, on a daily basis. Where did these foods come from? Oh, these are all foods from Europe. You know, oh, we have the privilege of eating the foods that our ancestors have been eating for the last 400 years. Why doesn't the market sell foods from Africa? Yeah. Right? Why doesn't the market sell foods from India? Right? Like, why do we have to go to the farmer's market to get Chinese vegetables?
Yeah. Why is there an international section in the grocery store? It's very true. I mean, we saw that breakdown as far as like hair products, you know, bringing it back to women, the women of the conversation, having hair products intermingled now so that it's not just this dusty shelf, you know, in the corner. Yeah. But yeah, I really like that you thought that far deeply into it, because it is about asking questions. And just to bring it back around full circle, having the conversations the same way your mother had that conversation with you, exposing children to those conversations, because I've heard from both my father-in-law and my father, who are men from retired military, and how back in the 80s and late 70s, when they went into the military, there were white men that they may bunk with, and that was the first time the white men were around a Black man or a Black person, and the perception that they may see is just like, you know, some of the perceptions that we have of other countries, and what we see on television. It's like we all just got to get a little more cultured and break down some of these communication barriers. And there's always going to be conflict, but I think having the conversation, having the tough conversations, like you said, is very key to us growing out of, you know, the ignorance of what America started with.
And of course, I don't mean to say that it is just in the minutia of daily life. It's absolutely in the minutia of daily life. There is always an opportunity to discuss race. Yeah. And when we fail to do that, we are only putting down all BIPOC people. Yeah. But it is about calling your representatives and calling your senators, put their numbers on your phone. They work for you. Let them know. You can just call them and say, I'm very concerned about race in the United States. You know, you don't have to even know that it's HR 40, but please vote yes on HR 40, you know, as well as your local people, all the people, just call them. You know, race is very important to me. Equality is very important to me.
Well, that's definitely evident, at least in this conversation. And again, we just want to thank you so much. We had this idea to have a conversation about reparations. We've talked about it before on the podcast, and we just wanted someone who had a little more insight. And ironically, it was a person that wasn't of color, but we really thought it was important to invite you into the conversation to give your insight and whatever information that you had, and just to speak on behalf of your counterparts as well.
We really thank you for coming on the podcast to talk to us about reparations. And I think the most enlightening part of it is the fact that it's not necessarily coming from a person of color, but it's coming from someone who was intentional about being our ally. So we, we're so grateful for that. And we love to hear more about, what you guys are doing. So please tell everybody where to follow you guys. If anybody wants to get involved or who heard your call to action and wants to raise awareness, wants to, make sure that we have representation, wants to have those tough conversations, where do they start? Who do they contact to be involved with FFRN?
Thank you so much. I just have to say, please listen to everything that Sonia Renee Taylor says at Sonia Renee Taylor on Instagram. She is the mouthpiece of the divine, and everything she says is absolute gold, and she says it every single day. Besides that, at Fund for Reparations Now, at Reparations Fund, we are the fundforreparationsnow.org. Please check out our platform. We have a symbolic apology. We have an opportunity for you to contribute reparations right this moment. And we have resources for you to continue to grow in your anti-racist journey, as well as updates and constantly, recommending content that is inspiring us in this work. And as Sonia Renee Taylor asked us to please gather our cousins. It is not a Black problem. It is a white problem. White people are doing this. And even though we may not feel how we're doing this, we are doing this. And it's our job to stop doing it, and to figure it out. Just like any form of abuse or addiction, when you're in it, it's very hard to understand the ways that it functions, but I swear it's real. And we have the power to do this. It's the right thing to do, and we will be more whole when we are whole as a nation. There's no way that isn't true.
Absolutely. Well said.
Well, thank you.
Well said. Thank you again so much.